So welcome. We're going to be talking
Thank
some
you.
Frankenstein with the editor.
Yeah.
So Guillermo has a very singular vision. There's been a ton of different Frankenstein versions. What were the conversations with Guillermo at the beginning to decide what version this would be, and why did you find appealing about his vision of Frankenstein?
You know, it's funny, on this film, there had been a long gap between the last time that I worked with Guillermo and on this one. And I got sent the script, I had messaged with Guillermo off and on, and then I went in for what I thought was an interview. And I showed up, and he was like, "Oh, hey, Evan, yeah, you've got the job." And then he left about a minute later, and the word Frankenstein we didn't really talk about at all. But reading the script, it was very clear that Guillermo was going to take Mary Shelley's story and be faithful to it in many ways, but also put his perspective on it and put his spin on it, and really tell a story about empathy and forgiveness that is very poignant and emotional.
Oh, well, you definitely felt it throughout the whole entire film. So it's almost more optimism than other previous versions. All right, so let's go in right into the beginning. So what was the decision like? How to open the film? What did you want? You have to stamp your tone and style. What was your thoughts on how we opened the film?
I mean, in this film, one of the ways that we're true to the novel is by starting with the framework of the ship. So we have the prelude where we meet the ship captain and the ship that's stuck in the ice, and introduce the creature, and you want to establish the creature, the threat of the creature that kind of everybody expects, so that later on when the creature breaks into the cabin and says, wait, I'm going to tell you my story, it's a little bit of a twist. It's a little bit of something unexpected, and we don't want to show those cards too early in the film.
So in a way, you wanted to set the audience up to expect the traditional Frankenstein,
Correct.
What they've been used to in movies.
Yeah.
Actually, more based on the movies anyway, the people's perception.
Yes.
All right, so then obviously one of the critical scenes in any Frankenstein is the Dr. Frankenstein showing, his science to all the other doctors. Mm-hmm. What went in that sequence? Because you really do have to establish Oscar Isaac, in that world very quickly and get.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the first scenes that we shot, and it was such a fun scene to edit together because he's a rock star in that scene, and he's flamboyant and he's showing off and he's arrogant, and you get the first sense of what path he's going to go down and the costs that the lengths that he will go to in order to achieve his goals, and so he's in this room full of professors. He's in a disciplinary tribunal and he does not care. He is showing off his work with pride. He's not trying to bend to what the panel wants him to do, and I think that's ultimately also the thing that convinces Harlander that this is the right guy, that he will achieve his goals no matter what.
I love the christophwaltz Oscar Isaac sequences, the seduction and playing into that thing. What were your thoughts on getting that? Because again, you have to seduce Oscar Isaac pretty quickly, and christophwaltz really delivered, I thought, in those scenes.
Yeah, there was actually the moment at the end of the Evelyn table scene, where Oscar says, "I'm going to think about it," and that was in and out for a while. But we wanted to draw it out because we really wanted the moment where Victor commits to getting into this relationship with Harlander to be in the lab when he sees what the future of the tower can be, and starts planning all the batteries and where everything's going to go, and you really see the gears start to turn in that moment. So it was important to withhold his participation in this agreement until you see him really get excited about it and be in the place that it's all going to happen.
It also strengthens Harlander's character, his ability to win him over.
Yes.
He had to work it, but still had power. I thought it was brilliant, that little choice.
Yes, and Harlander can't reveal his hand too soon. Right. So he desperately needs Victor to agree to this, but he can't appear to be desperate to need Victor to agree to it because he doesn't want those questions that would come after that.
We could talk a little bit about a waltz. It seems like a waltz. There's a lot of waltzing in this movie.
There's a lot of waltzing in this movie, yeah.
Indirectly. That leads to what we thought, because my director Indira and I we got to see the film. Miagoth and Oscar, I thought the first scene when they meet while they're eating, and she challenges them, and the great confessional scene.
Yeah.
That was a fun scene. But you really only had a couple of moments like that, and to establish the relations enough to drive the rest of the story. So what were your thoughts of running those sequences, introducing miagoth's character and their relationship, because you know how pivotal it is for especially in the third act.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important right from the very beginning to establish that Victor is captivated by Elizabeth, and that the beautiful shot where she's in Harlander's apartment, she's holding the skull, and she turns around and she's wearing that gorgeous dress, and you really see that on Victor's face, and so I think you buy from that point onwards that this is a person he's interested in, that he is also going to to pursue. And as we move along through the story, to the detriment of the goals of of his research, and then having that conflict at the dinner table between Elizabeth and Victor, I think only makes Victor more energetic and more aggressive, about pursuing her, because she's challenging him.
And he's not used to that.
And he's not used to that, but I think he also respects it, and he, and enjoys it. And so, yeah, it is a waltz between them, and we get to a very literal waltz in the bistro scene, to establish that he is spending more time pursuing her than he is doing the research, and he's also, very meanly sidelined his brother off at the lab to take care of all of the logistics, while he's hanging out with his brother's fiance. So. I think that establishing all of those tensions, early on and doing it, quickly, is important for the conflict in the film and important for establishing, their relationships and how they later break down.
One of our favorite editing sequences, actually we might have saying that a couple of times, but this one we loved something we'd never seen before. While he's building the monster, it is a waltz and it's optimistic, where we would expect it to be darker. And then the christophwaltz confrontation happens, and then the darkness of that. What was the thoughts going into that sequence, starting with kind of an optimistic waltz, and then driving to where he's going mad and the corruption?
Yeah, I mean, when he's assembling the body, he's in his element. He's having fun, and it was important that you get the sense that for him he's in a groove, and this is a beautiful thing. He is an artist in that scene, and so the choice of the music of using a waltz that Alexander composed for us was really, that really helped set the tone of that scene very effectively. And then yes, you go into the next scene, and that's where Harlander reveals, the twist, the piece of information he's been holding back, that he wants to be placed into the new body, and live, have an eternal life, even though he can't have that life in his current body. And so I think having those, it's always a good thing when you can have high highs and low lows and conflict, and then the time pressure of the storm coming in and the lightning, and adding all of that to the point where it's just chaos, nothing goes to plan. All of that makes for a really dynamic sequence.
Now, was there any temptation, or did you have to talk Guillermo out of, we need an Igor character pulling the lever, or the Buzzy, the electroids thing, or did you guys say from the beginning, we're not doing that?
It was pretty much from the beginning, we're not doing that. There were always nods to the Frankensteins that we know, the other Frankenstein films, and sometimes they stayed in and sometimes they got cut out. At one point there was Oscar did say it's alive, but not in the way that we all see her in our heads. But it felt like it was distracting in the moment, and it wasn't really our film, and we didn't need to make that reference at that time. But there are references everywhere to the other films.
But then actually we have a major tone shift because the storyline POV changes to the monster. What was the process of editing that? And as we were talking about, the sequence was so beautiful with the old blind man, which I know is historic, but it was really showed so much humanity and sweetness. What was the process of now turning? We had a dark thing going now where there is some light.
Yeah, I mean we made a very intentional choice of slowing the movie down at that point, because you need to give the creature time to develop, to experience the world, to make a friend, to learn what violence is. One of the questions that we had to solve was, at what point do we cut back to the creature? So when the creature's tail starts, where do we pick it up? And picking it up from the moment that the tower is lit on fire and he has to start fending for himself and escaping by himself, seemed like a good place to do it. And then, I think that's one of my favorite sections of the film is just, watching the creature learn and discover and be treated with care and kindness, and then ultimately heartbreak. For me, I think one of my favorite scenes in the film is when he goes back to the destroyed tower and picks up all the shattered, all the like torn pieces of paper, and realizes, how he came into being. So I think that you need to spend time with the creature, a significant amount of time with the creature up until that point in order to then feel the heartbreak in that scene.
And also says that because Oscar Isaac should have been the father.
Yes.
And failed from the beginning. It was it was such a sweet, tender thing. It didn't feel. I loved it because it just felt natural to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a running theme in the film of fathers and sons, and and as much as Victor suffered under his own father's parenting, he wasn't able to do anything different when the time came.
So then, just talking about waltzing, we did like the wedding. We have a joyous wedding, a waltz.
Yeah.
Oscar busts into miagoth, bridal, and then turns dark, and of course the tragedy. What would you thought was going the sequence there? Because you start light, and then Oscar's Dr. Madness happens, and then the tragedy happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important to give you the sense that maybe Victor had seen the error of his ways. And so you have the scene with William where he's where they are reconciling a little bit, and then he goes into Elizabeth's dressing room, and says like I'm sorry, and I love my brother very much, and Elizabeth just sees right through him, and then Victor goes into his own bedroom and has this unexpected confrontation with the creature, which is both validating for he succeeded beyond the level that he thought he did, but also he still can't bring himself, to show compassion.
Yeah, that was so sweet. And then at the end, which I thought, going back, forgetting the compassion, the nice little twist is there is actually forgiveness and hope. Yeah. What were your thoughts on the ending sequence, like putting that together? Was it a long struggle to find that balance, and how you wanted to on the ship?
It was. Our actors are amazing, so the scene came together, very quickly, but it was, editorially we have to. That's one of those instances. That's one of those scenes where you have to make sure that you, as the editor, are not getting in the way of what's happening in the scene. So we held long in places. We wanted to really make sure that that all of the emotion and all of the chemistry between Jacob and Oscar, really comes through, because it's an important moment of forgiveness between these two characters. And so we had a long version of that scene, and that mostly stayed in. And I'd say that what's left is probably 90% of what we shot, because it was so powerful, and you leave that scene in tears, and you can't help but feel for both of the characters in that scene, and plus the captain, who also learns that he should not pursue his goals at all costs. And I think when you just getting to that line of perhaps now we can both be human, is a really like moving moment between them.
Oh, it was beautiful. And again, the expectation was the opposite going into the movie for me.
Yes.
That's what was nice, the version of it.
Yeah.
So then there's obviously some visual effects, of course. Mm-hmm. But what was your initial reaction when you first saw the dailies of the wonderful costumes, the production design, the real sets and the real costumes when you first saw it, and how do you think that really helped you having more like grounded in reality visuals?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the benefits of working on a Guillermo del Toro movie, is that he hires true artisans and craftspeople to make all these things, and cares about making sure that you have a set that you can explore and interact with, and you have handmade costumes that have details in them that you may not even really pick up on what the detail is, but if you go and ask Guillermo, he'll give you a 20-minute answer about why the detail in Elizabeth's dress is related to like a blood cell or something like that. It's inspiring to be editing close to the sets, which I was able to do on this film. So I could go explore, I could go talk to Tamara, the production designer, or Kate, the costume designer, and really immerse myself in what they were doing, so that when the dailies come in, I'm familiar with with the lay of the land, and it really allows me to just sort of forget for a minute about any visual effects that we might need, and cut the scene as it comes in.
And one of the questions is, so overall, looking back on the film, what was the most challenging scene to put together for you? It could be even a small scene. What was the one that took a lot of you wrapping your head around, and also you might be most proud of, wow, I pulled that one off?
Yeah, let me think about most challenging for a little bit. I'll tell you the one that we recut the most, which is the montage starting with the bistro where they start dancing, and then we go into to Oscar spending time, or Victor spending time with Elizabeth and William at the tower. That, we did, at least 50 versions of that. And in that scene, as any editor knows, when you have a montage that's very closely tied to the music that you're cutting with, every small change requires a recut of music. And I was also editing the music on this, at least the temp music on this. And so every time that we would recut that, then I'd be like, okay, Guillermo, give me 20 minutes. I have to go figure out how to patch the cue. In terms of the what was challenging, honestly, the challenge on this editorially was doing what I had to do quickly, because Guillermo likes to come in 2 hours before a crew call every day and edit the scene that he shot the day before. So I would come in 4 hours before call, and I would do the edit, so that by the time he came in, we had something to talk about. The great thing is, because he's so directed and he so knows what he wants, you can look at his dailies and you can pretty easily interpret, this is where he wants me to be in this scene at this point, and then we'll cut over here. And so there's not a lot of ambiguity. Sometimes on another film you might get 8 hours of dailies, for a 2-minute scene, and then have to figure out how am I going to put this together. But he's very specific, and he knows what he wants. So the challenge is actually cutting something for him that surprises him, and then getting him to accept it. And sometimes he does, and sometimes he's like, oh, that works, but let's do it the way that I thought.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And
thank you.